Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our show, Different Flavors, here at ONTV in Lake Orion, Michigan. Tonight we have a very distinguished guest with us, Dr. Eldridge Huntington from Long Beach, California, right?
California State University,
California
Dominguez
State
Hills.
University. I knew that there was some place out there that you worked. I've known this gentleman for quite a while, since the early 80s, mid-80s. And I can testify the fact that he has considerable talents that are very interesting to all of those that accumulate around him for healing purposes. Even though he's a PhD and is a professor at the college in California, he is also well renowned, at least in Michigan, with regard to what he's been able to accomplish, or God has been able to accomplish through him with regard to healing. And tonight we're going to interview him and ask a few questions that you might find interesting. We hope you will find interesting. So, Eldridge, I understand that you knew at a very early age that you could heal people. Is that correct?
Yes, somewhere between 2 and 3 or something like that. My mother would be on the phone talking to her friends about different healers, and I always wondered why that was so significant, because I knew anybody could do it, even me, but I didn't know how, but I knew I could do it.
And that was at the age of 3. And from that point, I understand that your mother would have you do readings on people that would come over?
Well, I didn't know there were readings until I was 65, and that was like, they started when I was about 7. And people would come over on the weekend, and I would be fetched from my play and stand in the front of the room, and they asked questions, and I always wondered why these old people kept asking these silly questions. They were at least 30. And I just didn't understand why periodically, probably once a month or so, they'd come by and ask silly questions. Like, I don't even remember what they were. They were so silly. Anybody would know what the answer was, I thought.
Anybody but the people that were asking the questions, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And when you were about 9 or 10 years old, you had an interesting experience walking down the sidewalk. What was that about?
Oh, that one. That was about age 7.
7. Okay.
Yeah, I was walking down the street on a Saturday morning. It was bright and sunny in the summer, and the sun was shining, and the trees and telephone poles and everything had very long shadows, which drew my attention. And then I looked at mine to see how long my shadow was, and I didn't have one. And I looked and looked and looked, and turned around in the circle, lift one foot up, looked under that, looked the other foot up, looked under that, and no shadow. I decided, I should remember this, and then I walked on.
You walked on.
But I did remember.
You did remember. And I understand you had a near-death experience, too, at one point.
That was about age 10. Yeah, I went to summer camp and walked out in the beach, in the water there, and it was up at Jackson, Michigan, I think. And there was a drop-off. Of course, at 10, I didn't know what a drop-off was, since that was the first time I had ever been in a lake. And I lost it. My life went before me, and I was trying to figure out who was that, and I realized it was me, so I stopped trying to save myself and just watched my life go by. And I bumped into a lifeguard and climbed up his leg, up to his back, up, sat on his head, and he walked me over to the beach and laid me down as I coughed up all this water. And I guess it was not a big thing, because he went back in the water and tried to protect other kids or something. But around age 35, that became a very constant memory of mine. And all of a sudden, I realized that if my life went before me, then I was already dead. Why I knew that, I don't know. Later, I found out that was true.
Yeah.
But it caused me at 35 to try to find out what my purpose in life was, since I was spared this life. And so for several months, I tried to figure out what it was and to get on with it, you know. But after 2 months, I decided I probably wasn't smart enough to figure that out, and so I stopped.
Gave up?
Yeah.
Well, that was smart. You have an interesting way of evaluating people's lives from certain ages to. Can you give us a little rundown on how that works?
That came about of looking at how I developed spiritually, or how my spiritual knowledge developed. And it comes in spurts over periods of time. And as I look back, and I was drafting a book recently, and I look back, between 0 and 10, there were certain experiences, some of which I mentioned. Then between 11 and 19 or 18 or something like that, there are another set of experiences, and so on. The other thing was quite interesting is that they become more intense. But since you're experiencing all of these for the first time, you don't recognize that until many years, many decades have gone by, and you say, hey, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. And it's my feeling that if you can map that out, you can, you know, even say if you map it out now, you're 50 years old, you can pretty much project what's coming.
So you have to be prepared at each of these points. I understand from talking to you before that you have to make certain decisions at certain points to be ready for the next set of experiences.
Oddly enough, we have some what I call milestones in our lives that the first one starts at age 6, and between 6, 7, and 8, you're called upon to make a decision. And then on your 9th birthday, you lose that opportunity. Then on your 10th through 12th, another opportunity to make a decision. 14 to 16, 8 to 20, 24 to 27. And on your 28th birthday, usually, in fact almost always, you can point to that period of time to see what your skill sets are and what you've done up to that point. And when you're at 35 or 45 or even later, you can point back to age 28 to see how you got to where you are at age 40, 50, or 78.
Very good. I understand you also use the pendulum from time to time to help you.
Yeah, and I blame you for that. You probably remember we were driving through the backwoods of Michigan, and there was this perpendicular road that we hit, and you didn't know which way to turn, so you pulled a pendulum out, asked it a question. I'm watching you, and you made a left turn, and eventually we ended up back in civilization. That kind of caught my interest. What's that you got there?
I still have it with me. It's the same one. But so exactly when did you start using your healing skills? I know that you didn't use them until in your 40s.
Well, actually, a couple of things happen. When you have healing skills, you're using them even though you don't even know you're using them. A good example is you touch somebody and they feel better. They don't know why. They never told you they weren't feeling good in the first place. Mm-hmm. And whatever drove you to touch them was just a notion, and you don't take anything very seriously. So you go through life doing this. At 35, or somewhere around there, when I decided I needed to figure out what my purpose in life was, I then began to take the healing more seriously. And although I didn't know how to heal, I thought I became an effective healer within a very short period of time.
What's your most surprising experience as a healer? What?
All of them.
Yes.
Well, I'm still surprised that I'm a healer. Okay, even though I've been doing it for 40 years or so, it's still, I find interesting. Probably the most Well, there are probably a couple of them. One is, well, how about the funniest first?
Okay, let's do the funniest. Let's go with that one.
My sister. You know, I have a sister. She's
She's
83.
She's pretty funny.
Sunday, we were going from church home and then to visit other sisters, and she was complaining about periodically she has a back pain and she has knee pains and all of this, and her one doctor wanted to operate on her back, another doctor wanted her to exercise more. And what happened was, I was looking at this, I said, well, when do you have a back pain? Because you would think that she would be doing some exercise that would cause back pain or lifting something that would, but none of that was the case. She said, well, there's no pattern. Well, that didn't make sense to me. So I said, well, I started asking questions about this occurrence, and it turns out that when she's around certain people, she gets back pain. We were on our way to a nursing home.
Some people are a pain in the back, is that what you're saying?
We were on our way to a nursing home, which has a lot of people who are ill. So we went in there, and her back started hurting. And it hurt so badly that she had this look on her face. I said, my God, what's wrong with you? She said, my back is killing me. Well, we had just gotten out of the car. She hadn't had back pain all day. And I said, oh, really? And I said, this is very interesting. So when we left, I said, okay, say this prayer, which was, God, if this is not my pain, please send it back to where it's coming from. And of course, the pain went away immediately. And I looked at her and I started laughing. I said, how long have you had these pains? She said, oh, decades. I said, well, none of them are yours. You're an empath, and you pick up other people's pain. A doctor wanted to operate on her back to remove a pain that wasn't hers.
Well, he would have had a hard time finding it, I'm sure.
Right.
And wondering why you didn't.
Once you're on the table, there are no rules. I understand.
Yeah, we have a friend that's going down in the morning, so that's very good. Well, what are your experience with other healers? I got two situations now that you mentioned that. One is they were trained. Many of them are Reiki healers and very effective. And so they asked me questions about Reiki healing, and I said, well, I don't know anything about Reiki healing. They said, how'd you learn how to heal? I said, well, I was born this way. And of course, they look at me in great amazement. Okay. Then after they see me work, they become supporters or something like that, Right.
Champions.
Groupies. They call them groupies. Healing groupies.
So I don't know anything about Reiki other than talking to them. I've never had training in healing. I just do what comes to me.
Well, we had an interesting case just a few minutes before we came over to the studio, where you were helping a young lady with ADHD. Why don't you talk a little bit about your experience with kids with ADHD?
For about 20 years, I've been working with kids who had learning disorders. And those learning disorders include ADD, ADHD, and some other things. And usually these kids, if you remember, I asked her about her memory and focus and all that, and she's classic ADD. And it's nothing to be worried about, or there's certain procedures you can go through that will help improve your memory and help you improve your performance in school. And it's merely practicing, outlining, or actually it's a critical thinking model that you practice, and eventually the effects of it goes away. It never goes away, but you overcome it. How's that?
Are there any supplements that you need to take during those times?
Well, a friend of mine, Haley Haynes, I believe is, sells OPC3 through Market America, which is very effective. We use that quite a bit, and the parents and the kids like it.
It's an antioxidant.
And it works well.
Well, how do you track and heal? and do your workshops. I know you put on workshops, and we have one coming up before too long. This program will have, the workshop will be over by the time this program airs, but how do you work your workshops when you have their healing workshops?
Well, obviously, you don't know what kind of clients are going to come or what kind of participants you're going to have. They show up, so there's no way to practice. You just show up and you talk to the people, and they're in a group rather than singularly. But when you work on them, you can work on them individually or the group at the same time. You do them both.
I hope to videotape some of the things that are going on this weekend, coming weekend, during one of these workshops, and possibly be able to air those videos later. But
that would be good for people who feel that they have no options. There are many people who have been ill for many, many years, and some of it's misdiagnoses. Others, we had a lady whose mother had depression all of her life from the point the woman was a child, and she was depressed because that's the model of life that she had. She was in her 60s and still depressed and taking medication all those years. And I am convinced that she was not suffering from depression.
well, I can certainly believe that, especially with the experience you just had with your sister. And here she's experiencing other people's pain, being an empath, and not knowing that it was coming from other people.
Well, she also has another problem with arthritis in her knees. And that's even funnier than the first incident, because she meets with these people every Wednesday, and they play bridge every Wednesday. The problem is they're all older than her. She's 83, and they all have knee problems. She has no problem before they get there. After they start playing bridge, her knees are killing her until way after they leave. And she, up until yesterday, she assumed these were her problems, when in fact they weren't. You know. So her life should improve.
I think that that's a good possibility. I know quite a few people that are empaths. My daughter happens to be an empath, and she lives in a little apartment in Petoskey, and she scurries out to Walmart, get her things, and then she runs back to her apartment because she can't stand being around other people, because she can feel all of their pain and suffering.
Yes, it is a way to control that, but yeah, the younger you are, the more frightening it is, because you don't know what's going on.
I didn't really understand this until just a few years ago. I've taught her several techniques now, and she's much happier and able to do more than she was before, but she still
I worked with
struggles.
a social worker who was interviewing or providing social work services, therapy service to a 16-year-old young man who she felt was on the verge of a what do you call them?
Breakdown?
No,
Breakdown?
well, an episode. Epileptic fit or episode. And so she works with him, she goes home. That evening, she has an episode. She has an epileptic episode that lasted for a while. And she had to take off work and she was in her mid-30s and had never had an episode before. She went a year before I started working with her. It took me a week to eliminate her epileptic episodes because she was not an epileptic.
Oh, wow.
She was she was an empath. Now that was really unbelievable.
Well, in what way?
That you would not knowingly have an episode like that. It can be dangerous because you can pass out, you can driving and have an episode, but she is not epileptic.
Well, it's amazing that people can have these things all their lives and not realize that that's what's going on with them.
Well, a lot of people don't even know what an epileptic fit is and how that could affect you. They don't know that they're empaths. Your daughter has a problem, obviously, in just picking up everything.
That's right.
Even voices, probably. And that's not psychotic. That's another one of those empath things.
Well, it's awfully easy to misinterpret that and end up in some sort of institution under heavy
yes.
sedation.
Yes,
you know,
it
I think a
happens.
lot of people that are in these institutions actually shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and the medical community has no interest in studying empaths. Not that I've seen.
Well, do they really know that that's happening, or are they really familiar with it? Do they accept that possibility that people can pick up other people's?
Well, I suppose when the pharmaceutical companies come out with a pill to offset that kind of problem, they will acknowledge
Start
it.
recognizing it. Right.
You had mentioned earlier about my healing experience working with other people. I work with a guy on occasion who can see the blockages in the body, see the movement of the blood, see the content of the blood, whether it's sluggish or not, and can feel the energy in the body. And I'm usually sitting there watching him do his thing, and he says, well, there's a blockage here. Can you come over and help me clear this with your energy? And I sit there and watch him, and eventually he says, well, the blockage is gone. You didn't come over here. I said, I didn't have to come over there. I was in the room. But that was, he's a very interesting guy, and it's interesting when we work together.
Is he in California?
He's in California.
Oh, very good. You mentioned the fact that you didn't have to be close. There is no distance in space and time when you're talking about spirit, so it's not really surprising that this is true. I understand there was another interesting healing you participated in from California to London. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, this young man, he was about 50, he had a brain tumor, and he had had it for about 8 years. And it had affected him such that at night he couldn't see at all. And he slowly lost his ability to see more than shadows, so he had to stop driving. He was a very proud person, so he didn't have a cane or anything. How he maneuvered is beyond me, and nobody knew that he couldn't see. And he called me one evening and he said he had a headache and asked me if I would work with him on the phone, which I did. The headache went away. The next day I got a call. He had gone outside of his condo in London, and he could see. Okay, now, and then later, well, the brain tumor then became more active, and he called me again, and he was almost paralyzed. And I worked with him, and he complained about the heat. Now, he's 6,000 miles away. He's complaining about the heat from the healing on his brain. He could feel the heat in his brain. And the outcome of that was the heat got so intense that he couldn't handle it anymore. I told him to take a nap and call me in an hour. He called me back, and he said, I can see. I said, well, you've always been able to see. He said, no, I can see colors. I haven't been able to see colors in 10 years. And later, a month later, they did an X-ray, MRI, and they couldn't find the cysts or the tumors.
That's fantastic. And again, it's because there is no distance in spirit. You know, time and space have no effect with determine whether or not a healing takes place.
Right.
But also understand that we have to get beyond the person's own understanding to make them open to accepting healing.
A lot of people say that, and I don't find that to be the case. No. I have healed people with migraines in the middle of the Hilton Hotel lobby, and they didn't even know what I was doing. You know, it was a little strange. I'm standing there next to them doing this above their heads, and they're talking to me, wondering what I'm doing. We're holding a conversation, and say, oh, my migraine is gone.
And that's, well, at least that you didn't have the blockage of them knowing what you were doing. You know, they were open to the extent that they didn't know what was going on.
I know how to keep a secret.
Well, that's great. Well, what do you see as the solution to our present medical circumstance, our medical system?
You think about it, how many people are empath? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, 100 million maybe. So that those people who are empaths, who are currently trying to solve their problem by going to the doctor, if they were not seeking medical attention themselves, look how it would free up the medical facilities to handle those people that are having problems. In addition to which, healing is real. Okay, trust me, it is real.
Oh,
After 40 real. Some odd years of doing this, I guarantee you it works. People need to be able to understand themselves, their energies, their level of intuition, the ability to hopefully build on that intuition through meditation, which then makes them accepting of healing.
Well, let's see what your vision is of the healing powers of different individuals like yourself fit into our current medical system, or does it?
Well, it could, yes. There are some hospitals that actually will have a spiritual healer come in on a regular basis. I was in Ford Hospital here once visiting somebody who was supposed to have her kidneys out. They didn't know whether she was going to live the night, and all kinds of things going on. And I worked with her. They rolled her off to be examined and prepped for her operation the next day, and the next day the kidney operation didn't take place because she didn't have a problem anymore. And I started to ask the lady there, one of the hospital administrators, if I could work with other patients, and I chickened out.
Well, that's understandable. You don't want to get shot by the doctor.
Well, you know, we have a mutual friend who worked in the hospital. She was an occupational therapist, and she healed a patient. She told him, well, I can keep doing what I'm doing with you, but it's not going to work. But I can heal you if that's what you approve of. And he said, yes, do it. So he did. She did heal him. He was so grateful, he told everybody, and the hospital staff, administrators and everything, called a staff meeting, called her in and let her know, we will have no healing in this hospital.
There will be no more healing in this hospital.
That was her last time of working in the hospital.
That's amazing. Well, let's do one more thing. Let's have you repeat your special prayer.
Oh, which one?
The one, if it's not mine, send it back to where it came from.
Actually, there are two. That one, when you're feeling a pain, if you want to know whether or not you're an empath, you're feeling a pain, particularly lower back pain, if you have people close to you who are stressed out, you may feel their pain. Simply say this prayer: God, if this is not my lower back pain, please send it back to where it's coming from. If it goes away or even slightly diminishes, you're an empath, it's not your pain. If it slightly diminishes, keep saying the prayer and it will totally go away. Anxiety, fear, all of these things are contagious if you're an empath, and you don't have to put up with that.
Well, very good. I'm sure that the people in the audience are going to appreciate and use that to good advantage. We're really happy that you were able to be with us this evening, and we hope to have you back again one of these days. God bless.
My pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this portion of our program tonight, and we hope to see you again at different flavors on ONTV.